I'm Keegan Brown.
And I'm Daisy Gonzalez. After a tough loss to Ball State, we're back to discuss what went wrong, how this loss affects UConn going into the bye week, and how the Huskies can bounce back against Boston College.
Let's talk about it on this week's edition of Revolution Recap.
Like a torch to a flame when it burns hot.
After two big wins against some solid programs, UConn had to fall back to earth at some point, and it happened to be against Ball State. Huskies were shut out in the second half after scoring 21 points in the first. The defense let up 131 yards of total offense just in the third quarter, and penalties plagued UConn throughout this entire game. Carson Steele ran wild against a typically stout UConn front seven, ending with a whopping 179 rushing yards, 3 touchdowns, with 2 coming just in the fourth quarter. Now, Daisy, what was your biggest takeaway from this game for UConn?
Well, I think this game was very winnable for UConn had it not been for the penalties. UConn had 12 penalties to Ball State, 2 forcing them to give up 110 yards in consequence. You just can't win a football game with those type of numbers, and I think it's the sole reason why UConn didn't deserve this win.
Yeah, absolutely. 12 penalties is horrible, and you're right. You can't win a football game when you're giving up that much in penalty yards, and I'm sure that's something that Coach Moore is going to hammer into this team going into the bye week. A follow-up question for you, Daisy. How is this bye week going to help this team coming off such a tough loss?
This team has been riddled with injuries. I think having this bye week is going to give the Huskies the well-earned rest they need for this final stretch of games.
Yeah, definitely. Speaking of which, let's take a look at UConn's remaining opponents. After the bye week, the Huskies take on Boston College, UMass, and a heated rivalry game. Then comes Liberty, and those games are all at home. Lastly, UConn heads to West Point to take on Army to finish off the season. Daisy, what stands out to you the most in UConn's remaining schedule?
I think there's a real opportunity for UConn to go 3-1 and maybe 4-0 in this stretch. The big factor is that UConn stays at home for 3 of those games. UConn typically plays well at the Rent. They haven't had many home games this season, so this will be big for them. Army is a team that scares me, but if UConn can tighten up their run defense, then we should have a chance against them.
Yeah, definitely. And that's a good point you bring up about those home games. UConn's going to need all of the home field advantage they can get, and students, that means packing the Rents. Take the drive to East Hartford. It's a good time. Show some support to these Huskies because, all things considered, they've been having a fantastic season. That's about all the time we have for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Revolution Recap.
We'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss UConn versus Boston College and the results of that game. Make sure to follow us on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram at UCTV Sports for all things UConn football.